Well, cheers.
Yeah,
Glad we
cheers.
could do this.
Yeah. Really happy to be here.
It's going to get hot in here, by the way, as the day gets
As the
hotter,
day goes
'cause
on.
it's supposed to hit 102
Yeah.
here, and we don't have any sort of cooling. I hate heat, and
Yeah.
summer is my most hated season. So.
Do you call it a barrel house or a rick house? Or?
Yeah, it's the Barrel House.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this, as I understand it, is fairly recently replacing a much smaller barrel storage facility. Could you talk about the move here?
It is, yeah, absolutely. We just turned 20, and we've had a really slow, sort of deliberate growth to where we are now, right? When I got started, I was the only distiller. We were making maybe 20 or 30 barrels a year. We're making 36 to 40 a month now, but that's taken, 20 years to get to where we are. And as I said, that's deliberate. We wanted that slow growth to get to where we are. We'd keep our barrels in the actual distillery. Then we found this small space close to the distillery. And then, yes, we moved into the previous barrel house, which we affectionately called Jenny, which is on Jennifer Street, about a 25,000 square foot space. And that's where we started putting our barrels. We moved into here, about, I'd say 8 months ago. Still a pretty fresh move. We had over 6,000 barrels to move. So it was an interesting time, make sure you don't want to drop any of those, right?
Is there any whiskey still in there, or are you fully moved out?
There isn't. We're completely moved out. We'd maxed out there, found this space that was 3 times the size, and we moved everything into this space here to have all of our whiskey in one spot. We moved from Jenny thinking that, okay, we're always looking ahead, right? It's an aid product. We're thinking 10 years ahead of time. We're probably going to run out of space here pretty soon. This coincided with a capacity expansion of the distillery. We added some more fermenters. We added some steam valves to our still that actually gained us about 40% more capacity to produce per year. So we figured it was time to move. We looked around. We're only about maybe 2 miles from the previous barrel house here. But we found this space. This is 77,000 square feet, so a little bigger.
Yeah.
And we've moved all our barrels in. I mean, you can see that we stack our barrels vertically. That's how we like to mature. You're seeing a lot more of this. I mean, there's the traditional racked aging, which I think a lot of people go for as far as airflow and oxidation and maturation in that certain sense. For us, we're looking to do vertical stacking for a lot of reasons. A few, though, are safety. These barrels are actually strapped to the pallet itself, so you can move them around with a lot more ease, which is great. That means, less injured distillers. We're talking about square footage, and it comes at a premium when you're storing something, right? With those barrel racks, you really can't go over too high. If you get to 3, it really starts to get unstable, and barrels just kind of want to jump off of those racks.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas here we can go 5 high. So in that same amount of space, we're getting a lot more barrels stacked. We call these pods. They're kind of 4 by 4 by 5 high.
Okay.
And in doing that, we leave about a foot of space between each of these. And that allows for that good sort of cross and stack ventilation, which is really important to maturation. But yeah, this was a big jump for us. I mean, to go from, 25,000 square feet to 77,000 square feet was a big move, and we're filling it up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it looks like you have room for 2 more rows of pods.
A couple more. Yeah. Well, and then we'll move into the other room. So
there's another room.
We're sitting in the big room we call room 1. This is a really cool space. This is a pretty old building. And for us, as far as maturation goes, like we don't want any kind of heating or cooling. We don't really need it. Here in the Willamette Valley, we have natural year-round aging, right? Our average winter temperature is about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Once you get into the kind of low 40s, high 30s is where maturation will halt. So we've got those cool winters and they're wet, but we don't really get much freezing. And then we've got these hot, dry summers, of course. So we get great, temperature cycling throughout the year. And so, there's no any kind of cooling or heating in this space. It's just ambient temp. Whatever's going on outside will pretty much be the same as in here.
Does this space have a good amount of thermal resistance?
It's pretty temperate here for the most part. We don't really have to worry about that. One of the reasons we did pick this space was because of the high ceilings. in case there were, particularly hot weeks or cold weeks, that we have that buffer there for sure. We have noticed though that the southwest facing wall does generate a lot of heat.
Okay.
And so
is that why there's less barrels over there right now? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we're still, like I said, we're new in this space, so we're trying to kind of dial in what's happening in all of the corners of the warehouse, right?
Yeah.
And so I think eventually we will start to put barrels there once we have a better idea of how often it's hot, what's going on there. We have temperature probes and humidistats all over here, just taking readings. When we moved into this space, we had vents all installed. These are basically like makeup air units. So we have 14 throughout the whole warehouse that's just moving air. And so that draws air in constantly. And so we saw, colder winters, and I think we're seeing a hotter summer as well. So it's a little different from our last space, but therein lies the challenge of maturation.
You've mentioned in the past that your angel share was as much as 6% and usually was 3% every year after that was probably at Jenny.
Yes.
Do you have any idea what your angel share is going to look like in this space yet?
Not quite yet. I think it's still early to tell. But for the 8 years that we were in our previous warehouse, I mean, we're filling into new charred oak, right? So these barrels we're going to take up a little more than, say, an ex-bourbon or a used cask, right? So about 6% the first year in loss, and 3 to maybe 4% every year after that. Being in a space where we're seeing temperatures a little colder in the winter and a little hotter in the summer, I imagine that might go up a little bit, but still a little early to tell. So we'll see. But I did the math recently with the amount of barrels that we have now, and with just sort of ambient general angel share, we're losing about a gallon an hour.
Wow.
In the barrel house, yeah.
So how many barrels did you say are in here?
In here, we're at maybe about 6,200 or so these days. Yeah,
that adds up fast, I guess.
It does. Yeah, I mean, it's it's a couple 100,000 gallons of whiskey, right?
Yeah.
So it's nothing to get too upset about.
Like any good barrel house, as soon as we walked in the front door, even before we got into the barrel space, you could smell the whiskey in the air.
I love that. At this point, I'm completely used to it.
Yeah.
I don't even notice anymore. I love it to bring people in and they're like, oh my God, the smell is amazing. And I think probably I just smell like the barrel house now. And
Do you think being that acclimated to a certain level of the smell of your own whiskey softens a certain like sensory analysis angle on the whiskey, or like maybe it even helps you find the differences from barrel to barrel or type to type?
I don't think so. I think the latter to what you had said, either is it maybe dulling it or sharpening it. I actually think it sharpens it a bit. I think that, when we're blending, we're not actually here out in the warehouse. We have a closed lab with air purifiers where we're doing all of our sensory.
Yep.
And so, in fact, I try to go out, and if I see Westward at a bar, I'll order it, not just because I want to, keep my job, but also I want to try it out in the world and see what it's like, because I don't know if you feel the same way, but drinking the same whiskey in different places.
All of the whiskey that I make, I like to.
Well, you know what I mean? Like if you've had like a certain whiskey either at a restaurant or at your friend's house or in your den or
it's different.
in a barrel house, like it's just a little different, right? And so I think that's where I try to gain perspective is if I see it on the shelf, bring it down and I'll try it here and see what it's like and see how it is out in the world.
Yep. Could you paraphrase what the American single malt whiskey definition is?
We've been making single malt for a while. For the first few years with Westward, we just called it Oregon straight malt whiskey. That's the term we used. But as we saw more and more single malt makers pop up around the US, we started to kind of just chat with each other and talk about the different styles, because it seemed for a while like it might be kind of impossible to define, because I think a lot of single malt makers in the US are like winemakers, whereas this is their version, this is their style, this is their take on single malt, right? I don't think we're going to have regions like you find in Scotland. It's like it's like a winemaker in the Willamette Valley saying, well, this is how I make Pinot Noir, right? Versus someone in Burgundy that's like, well, this is how I make Pinot Noir, and they're not going to taste the same, right? And so we did eventually get together to try to come up with what American single malt could mean to someone, and just kind of seeing it on the shelf, like, okay, quickly, like, what is this? What can I expect from this? And that's, some of those are pretty simple, right? 100% malted barley, made in the US by one producer. There's a few others to that, but if you want me to quickly sum it up, that's what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. The staff of this distillery, the people who founded this distillery, came from a lot of different places. So you talk often about having a brewer's philosophy going into the whiskey making process, and of course treating it the right way to develop as much flavor as you can. And then you also have a lot of people who come from the wine world who are involved in the blending and are blending the product a bit like you would blend a wine and treating it in that way. Could you comment on those sorts of influences that are coming into the whiskey making process here, and maybe even which you think are the most essential to your brand and the flavor profile that you hit?
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about single malt, even I'd say craft whiskey in the U.S., what I find really fascinating about it is how people will borrow from other spirits makers or winemakers or breweries as well, right? And as I said, we're rooted in beer, but I certainly look to wine for certain things, and to cognac as well. So yeah, that's you see a variety of people in the field these days. There's brewers, there's ex-winemakers. With our Pinot cask, we're working directly with winemakers, in speaking to them about the particular casks and the wine that was in them beforehand. So there's a bit of all of those elements. And like I said, that's to me the most compelling thing about craft is the willingness to experiment, but also collaborate. I think that's really kind of key to who we are at Westward, is just how collaborative we are. If we see someone doing something really fascinating and delicious, and they can share the same vision or at least have a similar ethos, we want to work with them. We want to develop something together, see what we can do. For us here, in the maturation part of the process, where I'm managing the barrel house here and all of our blends, I've taken a lot from the old world, from cognac. For sure. Cognac is a big love of mine. We've had this discussion before. Huge fan of cognac and Armagnac as well. But when you talk about barrel house techniques, what are you doing with the barrels as they're aging and the spirit inside, really can make a huge difference. And so looking to cognac as far as cooping, certain batches, even slow proofing, sort of like slowly adding water as to not break up a lot of those bonds and lose flavor, and actually help develop better flavor. So yeah, I'd say for us, when it comes to maturation, we're really looking to I'd say the old world brandy makers and what they've been doing in their shays.
Okay, so there's a great segue here. What we have in our glasses
Yes.
is Milestone edition number 1.
It is.
Which is aged in a Solera system.
Yes.
As far as I know, that's mostly used in sherry. Is that also used in cognac?
I wouldn't say it is. Yeah.
Okay.
It's something that sherry makers developed, and it's what they're pretty famous for. I think maybe here and there you might find it, but this is absolutely borrowed from sherry. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Could you talk to us a bit about this release and what goes into this?
Yeah. So I pulled some Milestone 1 for us out of the Solera system. It's a 21 barrel final Solera sort of that I've developed for Milestone. And this really does speak to who we are at this point in our journey as distillers, right? So we just turned 20 years old. We've been making a style of whiskey that wasn't made before, really. So, there was a lot of exploration. There were a lot of good lessons, I'll say, We're pretty experimental as well. So at times, there's mistakes. You learn from those mistakes. Some of them are delicious mistakes, some are not. And so Milestone, I think, is an expression of where we are now. We've also got some older stock as well. We've got some older whiskey that's been developing and changing from, I think, what a lot of people expect is the standard Westward profile. And so, speaking to maturation techniques, what we're doing in the barrel house, because a lot of what we talk about at Westward is, grain, is fermentation, is our low reflux pot stills that, retain a lot of that flavor from our beginning processes. Whereas Milestone takes that conversation a little further to what we're doing with the barrels in the barrel house. Yeah, so it's a blend that I put together of some of our oldest whiskeys, some stuff that's a little older than 10 years, a few different wine finishes as well, and really just looking to, sort of elongate the finish, give Westward sort of more of a an elegant feel to it, because we otherwise generally like Westward to be really bright and vivacious and robust, and so this was sort of a more of an elegant sort of older brother kind of style. Yeah.
Nice. Well, cheers. Let's have a taste.
Cheers.
Okay, so about this space again. So we mentioned that there's some extra room, but it's not a lot of extra room. There's this space, there's a couple of extra,
Yes.
and there's another room.
Right.
What happens when you fill this up? Is there a point at which it's too big? Would you want to move to an additional facility or a bigger facility? What happens when you fill up this space?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, we just moved in, but it's something to think about. Yeah, absolutely. From a company perspective, as far as, whiskey makers that started off with just 2 people, making a small amount of whiskey a year to where we are now, that filling up this space would be incredible, right? I mean, we're in over 20 countries at this point, and we're taking Westward as far as we can. We want everyone to experience Pacific Northwest single malt, and we want people to know that American single malt is something fascinating. So yeah, I hope we do fill up this space. I think we'll probably, hopefully, be ahead of it, and looking to something else. But once we're filling up here, I mean, I think we might have to actually move down into wine country. As far as like a bigger space goes. We're outside of Portland, but we're still in the Willamette Valley, so we have that aging climate that we want here in the valley. So I think we'd probably just move farther south, and get something going in wine country. That's what gives us that Westward character, is having those long, cool, wet winters. Seeing 30% more rain than the national average, right? Because you get over the Cascade Mountains to the east, and it's dry. It's grasslands, it's high desert. It's a very different climate. So, yeah, I mean, here's to filling this place up.
Yeah, cheers to that. So there's certain products in the industry that are named after their creators, right? We have Kilkeegan from Santa Fe. We have the Quintessential from Cedar Ridge, Murphy Quint,
right.
And we have Milestone. Is this just a coincidence, or is this named after you?
It is named after me. This was marketing's idea.
Okay.
This was not my idea at all. Actually, no kidding, after we had the initial meeting, because I had been developing this for years and pitched it to everyone, and they loved it. And then they came back with the name, and I asked them to change it, and they said, no, it's great. So Milestone, but it has several meanings, right? It's also, I think part of it is a milestone for Westward, because we've hit 20 years, and we're kind of showcasing our talents and what we've learned over time. I think it also is a milestone for American single malt in general, just kind of like staking another flag in the ground and saying that like we're making world-class whiskey here, and this deserves to be on the world stage. And then yes, the not so inconspicuous Easter egg, we'll say, as far as, named after me, I guess, in a way. But yeah.
I think it's hidden pretty well. I mean, for what it's worth, it didn't immediately scream at me.
That's great.
That this was a self-named product in any way.
It's funny that you brought up Quintessential. Murphy and I ended up seeing each other at some festival, I think a couple years back. And I mentioned, I was like, so how's that? Yeah, how's that going for you? The Quintessential. How do you feel about that? And I mentioned that, Milestone was on the way. And, yeah. But no, I mean, it's...
Were you looking for him to tell you it was a bad idea?
Yeah, maybe a little commiserating, and see what was going on there. But no, I mean, like I said, to me, it has several meanings. But ultimately, it is just a landmark release for us.
Elegant, as you say. Elegant is one of the best ways to put this.
Well, thanks. And it's a luxury release for us. So it is priced at a premium. But I kept it at the first edition at pretty low proof, 86, 43%. I felt that was going to show the elegance, and that was going to show the length and palate, and show how complex the finish was. I felt like if I had more alcohol in the blend, it might actually hide it, because, a certain part of elegance is subtlety, right?
Yes.
And so to me, I look to, that's that kind of classic single malt Scotch ABV, 43%.
There's a reason that Macallan does 43% all the way up into the 30s and 40s year old. So.
Exactly. And so, I got a bit of a kind of pushback on that, like, hey, if we're going to release this premium whiskey that's at a very high price, people might be expecting a little more ABV,
Yeah.
and I think especially these days, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of cask strength single barrels and a
Yeah.
lot of hazmat whiskeys kind of flying around, but no, we kept it at 43%, and I think that's where it shows best. Having said that, each edition may be a different ABV, right? Because each edition is going to build on the previous one. That's the whole point of the Solera, right? Is to kind of always have the previous editions in there, remove what we need, and adjust for bottling. But I mean, it could change each year. It really just depends on how it's expressing, where I'm taking it, and we'll see.
Did you know whiskey enthusiasts see cask strength and they see 120 and they immediately say, "Is that really cask strength?" And you could just, do something else. Call it, there was a really good Scotch that was really upfront about they were proofing it down to what they felt was the best expression. And I think it came out at 47.3% alcohol, which is just an odd number.
Right.
And the fact that it's an odd number lends a certain cachet somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes it, stand out a bit more and more unique.
Yep.
And true. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So is Milestone 2 also 43%, or did we see a slight increase?
So with Milestone Edition 2, I got the inspiration for the second edition when I was in Taiwan. We sell Westward in Taiwan. It's a big market for us. While I was there, and I didn't know I was walking into this. This was all filmed, but they paired each of our 4 flagship kind of core expressions with different iconic Taiwanese street foods.
Oh, that's so cool.
And it was awesome. It was so cool. So
Which one did they put with the stinky tofu?
The stinky tofu was with cask strength.
Nice.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. The flavor matching was fantastic, but it took Westward in a totally new direction that I'd never even thought about, and that was just how the spice is expressed. And that's what I focused on. That was the theme for edition 2 was, we've kind of got those classic American whiskey spices in Westward because we're using charred new American oak, that, baking spice, kind of cloves, cinnamon, spice that you get from that new oak is really a hallmark of American whiskey, right?
Yep.
I wanted to take it in more savory direction, get a little more sort of, I would say Southeast Asian spice, right?
Or an umami maybe?
A little umami, absolutely. A little even incense as well.
Oh, nice. I love incense.
Yeah.
You say incense is one of my favorite tasting notes.
Is that right?
Yeah. If I'm rating a whiskey highly, chances are incense is somewhere in my tasting notes.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Well, that's just it. It's kind of rethinking the whole spice aspect of the whiskey and just taking it in another direction and surprise people with it.
You touched briefly on the long fermentation.
Yes.
As I understand it, that is one of the hallmarks of the Westward style. Could you go into some detail about the choices that were made in your fermentation process?
I feel like these days more and more you get people talking about fermentation in the whiskey world, but for a long time it really wasn't something, and I don't know if it just wasn't either that fascinating or I guess part of the romantic story that gets kind of lost in selling whiskey brands a lot, or even just maybe sometimes proprietary, right? That can also be a case, but fermentation for us, as with everything in Westward, is an open book. We are completely transparent. We want people to see what we're doing because we love what we're doing, and we're excited to tell people about it. So, fermentation for us, really is expressing a ton of flavor. We know as brewers that beer strains can produce over 600 different flavor compounds. That's just with fermentation, right? That's not including all that you can get from barley, all that you can get from the malting process, what's concentrated in the stills, what happens during maturation. That is just fermentation. And that's one element that we felt we really wanted to focus on. We trialed a bunch of different ale yeasts in the early days. The 2 sort of front runners were Scottish ale yeast and then Chico yeast, which is the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale strain. Those were kind of our front runners there. We chose the Chico yeast because we felt that it produced, amazing whiskey, but also in producing a single malt, in producing a style of whiskey that people really weren't familiar with yet, we wanted some familiarity to it built in. And so using a yeast strain that had, made famous the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale that put craft brewing on the world map, that made sense to us. It's a fantastic yeast, tons of tropical fruit, stone fruits, some nice honeyed notes, even a little grassiness as well. Yeah, and we just let it do its thing. I mean, we don't go too fast. It's 96 to 120 hours that we do our fermentation at a pretty cool temp, and we're talking about really just producing a lot of good flavor, right? We don't want to have this fermentation that gets a little too hot and goes a little too fast, because you're going to produce off flavors, which you try to fix in the still, or you try to fix during maturation as well. Our whole philosophy is, why don't we just make good flavor every step of the way and not have to worry about masking or removing any bad flavors. So that's what that ale yeast does for us, and that's why we take it to that 6-day fermentation length at a really cool temperature. We are deliberately inefficient in that way. We could use a dry, distilled yeast, get the same, if maybe not more, alcohol out of the fermentation, but it just wouldn't taste the way that we want it.
Do you find that the flavors that you develop in fermentation very clearly translate to the distilled product, or do you find that some of those flavors, as nice as they are, actually do get lost in distillation? And do you find that they come back as chemical reactions happen in the barrel?
Yeah, it's a great question as far as, the flavor that you're creating in the beginning versus, taking it through the distillation process and then aging it, what changes, what's lost. That's a big part of our philosophy with distillation. It's a pretty hands-off process. We have these custom stills that are low reflux. And so the whole point of these stills and how we do what we do, because we run at a pretty fast rate, we keep our condenser at a medium to kind of cool temp. We want everything in that wash from that fermentation to be concentrated into that distillate. Our white dog, we call it barley eau de vie at the distillery. It just has so much character. So yeah, it absolutely carries through the distillation process and through the maturation process as well. Because of the shape of the stills that we have and the way that we're distilling, it makes a pretty oily, robust whiskey. And so that new make stands up really well to that new American oak. So yeah, a lot of that is retained. I'd say almost all of it. Throughout the maturation process, some of that tropical fruit will get, I'd say, sort of changed, oxidized into more like dried fruit or even stone fruit. And then, eventually you lose some of that brightness, I'd say, after probably 8 years or so in the cask. It just starts to become a bit of a different whiskey.
So the 7-year bottled in Vaughn versus the 10-year plus Milestone, you see that transformation in flavor? Like, is that something that customers could get? You compare your whiskeys and see how age is transforming it over that boundary.
Yeah, you're talking about that sort of that transformation when it goes from what we know Westward as to older stuff. Yeah, what I blended into Milestone was a small amount of 10-year. I think enough to sort of get some nuance out of some things I wanted, kind of add a top note here and there, but it wasn't really meant to be the base. It wasn't meant to be the driver of that blend. In the 7-year, I feel like, that's kind of on the cusp right there of losing some of that brightness. And that's not necessarily bad. It's just developing into a different expression of Westward at that point. I think people would absolutely be able to pick that up. Yeah, it's fairly dramatic.
Yeah, I would agree that 7 years on the cusp of what I know as core Westward, what I've known as core Westward for 3 years now, and it's becoming something else. Yeah. And then Milestone, of course, is on the other side of that transformation. There's something soft and elegant about it.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm glad that he pointed out that we had these here also set aside, not buried in the Solera. Yeah. But this is edition 2, which, we just bottled about a week and a half ago.
Nice. Well, cheers.
Edition 2.
Let's check this out. Oh yeah, that is quite different.
I'm curious what you think. And you said that you love incense, and you love that incense note in whiskey.
I do. I get it. There's more wininess to this. Savory for sure.
Yeah.
Savory in a way that a good like Oloroso cask scotch is savory.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's got the baking spices and, like you said, the incense. This is, not to play favorites already, but this is like between the two, clearly I like this one better.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a fan of that kind of incense note, like I said, pushing the spices right, a little more savory, get some of that kind of incense going on it.
Yeah.
when we say baking spices with American whiskey, we talk about like cinnamon, clove, but I want to get a little more of that sort of like cardamom.
Yeah, I was going to say
there.
it's like orange oil and cardamom.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just kind of push that spice in a direction that like we've never had in Westward before.
I mean, I was always curious, like, hey, Milestone seemed like it was like the, let's make this as elegant as possible. And I was wondering, are you going to try to hit that same profile over and over again?
Yeah.
Or are you going to evolve it? And I mean, Solera-wise, it makes sense that you're evolving it. And
Right.
now I can't wait to see what edition 3 looks like.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
cool.
No kidding. I mean, yeah, it's something that, I mean, I still think this has great length to it. It's got a nice elegance to it. And it is actually a little higher in ABV, but I think that doesn't mask any of the sort of nice, subtle, elegant notes in it. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm glad you dig it, man.
Yeah. I'm going to hang on to this glass for sure.